The transport shuttle shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Dongwoo Lee gripped his armrest tighter and glanced at his family. His wife Sun-hee sat calmly beside him, reading something on her tablet. Their teenage son, Woo-jin, pressed his face against the small window, eyes wide with excitement. Their daughter Nari bounced in her seat, unable to contain her energy. "Dad, look at all that water," Woo-jin whispered in amazement. Below them stretched an endless ocean. The planet's surface was almost completely covered in deep blue water that sparkled under the light of its twin suns. Floating on this vast sea were hundreds of structures that looked like glittering jewels. Resort complexes, entertainment districts, and luxury hotels rose from the water on elegant platforms connected by graceful bridges. "It's beautiful," Nari said, her small hands pressed against the window. Dongwoo smiled at his children's wonder. He had saved for 3 years to afford this family vacation. Every credit had been carefully set aside from his modest job back on Earth. Sun-hee had helped by taking extra work in the evenings. The trip represented a significant sacrifice for their family, but he wanted his children to see the galaxy beyond their home planet. The shuttle pilot, a bored-looking alien with 4 arms, announced their arrival at Terminal 7. As they descended toward the landing platform, Dongwoo could see other shuttles arriving and departing. Most were sleek, expensive vessels that made their own transport look like a delivery truck by comparison. The landing was rough. The pilot seemed more interested in his communication device than in providing a smooth arrival for his passengers. Dongwoo helped gather their simple luggage while other passengers pushed past them. He noticed that the wealthy-looking aliens received polite assistance from the crew, while his family was ignored. "Welcome to Aquatica Prime," the pilot said without looking up from his device. "Please exit quickly. I have another departure in 10 minutes. The Lee family stepped onto the landing platform and immediately felt the warm, humid air of the ocean world. The smell of salt water mixed with exotic flowers filled their senses. Around them, the sounds of the resort came alive. Distant music played from entertainment areas. Alien voices chattered in dozens of different languages. The gentle sound of water lapping against the platforms created a peaceful background rhythm. But what struck Dongwoo most was the clear division he could see everywhere. Wealthy alien tourists moved through designated areas marked with glowing signs. They wore expensive clothing that seemed to change colors in the light. Their luggage floated behind them on anti-gravity platforms. Servants from various species hurried to meet their every need. In contrast, beings like his family walked through different areas. These sections were functional but plain. No floating luggage, no color-changing clothes, no servants. "This way to budget terminal processing," a mechanical voice announced through speakers. Sun-hee touched Dongwoo's arm gently. "It's fine," she said quietly. "We knew what to expect." They followed the signs toward their processing area. The walkway was clean but clearly older than the gleaming paths used by the wealthy guests. Through transparent walls, they could see the luxury processing areas where aliens reclined on comfortable couches while staff handled all their paperwork. The budget terminal was crowded with families and individuals from dozens of species. Most looked tired from long journeys. Children cried while parents tried to manage paperwork and luggage. The air was thick with the stress of travel and the anxiety of people spending money they could barely afford. "Next," called a voice from behind the processing counter. The Lee family approached the desk where a tall, thin alien with green skin and multiple eyes looked them over with obvious disinterest. Her nameplate read, "Kira 5, Processing Specialist. Purpose of visit," she said without looking up from her screen. "Family vacation," Dongwoo replied politely. "Duration, 7 days. Accommodation booking reference." Dongwoo provided the number. Kira 5 typed slowly, her multiple eyes showing her boredom. After several minutes, she frowned. This booking is for Ocean View Basic. Are you certain this is correct? Yes, that's right. She looked up at them for the first time, her expression suggesting she found something amusing. Ocean View Basic is our most economical option. The rooms are quite small. No luxury amenities, no priority access to resort facilities. We understand, Sun Hee said calmly. Very well. Kira 5 processed their identification documents with deliberate slowness. Your temporary resident permits for Aquatica Prime are approved. You are restricted to budget areas 1 through 5. Premium areas require upgraded accommodations. Transportation to your hotel departs from Platform C7. Platform C7 is that way. She pointed vaguely toward a distant area. They gathered their luggage and began the long walk to Platform C7. Along the way, they passed through the main terminal area, where wealthy guests relaxed in comfortable lounges. Aliens with shimmering scales sipped colorful drinks. Beings with translucent wings floated gracefully near the ceiling. A group of rock-like creatures sat in a circle, their bodies glowing with internal light as they communicated through color. Changes. Wu Jin stared openly at the amazing diversity of alien life. I can't believe how many different species there are. Remember your manners, Sun Hee reminded him gently. It's rude to stare. But Mom, look at that one with the tentacles for hair. And that one is literally made of crystal. Nari giggled. As they passed a family of aliens who looked like walking flowers, the parent creature's petals changed color when they noticed her laughter, shifting from blue to warm yellow. Platform C7 turned out to be much smaller and more basic than the platforms they had seen earlier. The transport vehicle was a simple hoverbus with worn seats and scratched windows. Most of the other passengers looked like budget travelers similar to themselves. The driver, another four-armed alien, seemed friendlier than the shuttle pilot. First time on Aquatica Prime, he asked the Lee family. Yes, Dongwu replied. You picked a good time to visit. The weather has been perfect for weeks, and the resort you're staying at is decent. Not fancy, but clean and safe. They treat their budget guests fairly well. During the ride to their hotel, the driver pointed out various landmarks. The crystal gardens where wealthy aliens held elaborate parties. The floating markets where rare goods from across the galaxy were sold. The arena complex where interspecies sporting events drew huge crowds. See that tower there? The driver said, pointing to a massive structure that rose high above the water. That's the governance center. The planet's administration works there. And those smaller buildings around it are the corporate offices of all the major resort operators. Sun Hee leaned forward with interest. Who runs the planet's government? Oh, it's not really a government like you'd have on most worlds. Aquatica Prime is privately owned. The owner leases different areas to resort companies and entertainment corporations. Very profitable setup. Do you know who the owner is? The driver laughed. Nobody knows that. Some wealthy consortium from somewhere in the galaxy. They keep it very private. Probably some alien billionaire who wants to avoid taxes. Their hotel finally came into view. The Ocean Breeze Resort was a modest complex of connected buildings floating on a stable platform. It wasn't ugly, but it looked plain compared to the luxury resorts they had passed along the way. The buildings were painted in faded blue and white. The windows were standard transparent materials rather than the smart glass that adjusted automatically to lighting conditions. As they disembarked, Dongwu noticed that their fellow budget travelers seemed relieved to have arrived. Families helped each other with luggage. Parents corralled excited children. Everyone moved with the careful efficiency of people who were spending precious money on this experience and wanted to make the most of it. The hotel's entrance was clean and welcoming, if simple. A sign in multiple languages welcomed guests to the Ocean Breeze Resort. Below it, smaller text listed the amenities available to budget guests. Community pool access during specified hours. Basic dining room with standard galactic cuisine. transportation to public beaches twice daily. Dongwu looked at his family as they prepared to enter the hotel. Sun-hee smiled encouragingly at him. Woo-jin and Na-ri chattered excitedly about all the things they wanted to see and do. Despite the clear class divisions and the modest accommodations, this was still an incredible adventure for a family from Earth. "Ready for our vacation?" he asked. "Ready," they replied together. As they walked through the hotel's entrance, none of them could have imagined the events that would unfold over the next few days. They were simply a human family, grateful for the opportunity to explore the galaxy, unaware that their presence on this ocean world would soon change everything. The next morning, the Lee family woke to the sound of gentle waves against their hotel platform. Their room was small but clean, with 2 beds and a tiny bathroom. The window offered a view of the endless ocean, dotted with other resort complexes. In the distance, "Can we go swimming right after breakfast?" Nari asked, bouncing on her bed. "Let's explore first," Sun-hee suggested. "We should understand how things work here before we jump into activities." After a simple breakfast in the hotel's dining room, they set out to discover their new temporary home. The Ocean Breeze Resort was larger than it had appeared the night before. Multiple buildings connected by covered walkways housed hundreds of budget guests from dozens of different species. Their first stop was the resort's main information center, where a friendly robot provided them with maps and activity schedules. The robot's voice was pleasant but mechanical. "Welcome to your first full day on Aquatica Prime," it said. "Please note that different areas of our resort complex have different access requirements. Your budget-level accommodations include access to community areas 1 through 3, standard dining facilities, and scheduled transportation to public recreation zones." Dongwu studied the map the robot provided. Different areas were marked in various colors. Green areas were freely accessible to all guests. Yellow areas required upgraded room packages. Red areas were restricted to premium and luxury guests only. "What about the pools?" Woo-jin asked. "Can we use any pool we want?" "Pool access depends on your accommodation level," the robot explained. Budget guests may use Community Pool Area C during designated hours. Standard guests have access to pools A, B, and C. Premium guests enjoy access to all standard pools, plus the Infinity Pool Complex. Luxury guests have exclusive access to private pool suites and the zero-gravity water experience. Nari frowned. "So we can only use one pool." "Community Pool Area C is quite nice," the robot assured her. "It features standard water at comfortable temperatures, basic seating areas, and scheduled cleaning every 4 hours. They thanked the robot and began exploring their accessible areas. The Community Pool Area C was located on the resort's outer edge, farthest from the main buildings. As they walked there, they passed other pool areas through transparent walls. Pool Area A bustled with alien families enjoying various water activities. Strange creatures with fins swam alongside beings that seemed to absorb water through their skin. Children from multiple species played games that involved manipulating small water spheres. Pool Area B was quieter and more elegant. Adult aliens floated on comfortable platforms, while automated systems provided drinks and snacks. The water itself seemed to shimmer with different colors, creating beautiful patterns that shifted constantly. Through another transparent wall, they glimpsed the Infinity Pool Complex. Here, water appeared to flow upward in impossible spirals. Wealthy aliens relaxed in floating chairs that moved through 3-dimensional water formations. Some areas had water that glowed with soft internal light. "Wow," Woo-jin whispered. "How do they make water do that?" "Advanced technology," Sun-hee replied, but her voice carried a thoughtful tone. "Very expensive advanced technology." Community Pool Area C was functional but basic. The pool itself was large enough for several dozen people, with clear blue water and simple entry steps. Around the pool, basic chairs and tables provided seating. A small snack bar offered simple refreshments. Despite its simplicity, the area was pleasant. Families from various species enjoyed the water and sun. Children played while parents relaxed. The atmosphere was friendly and welcoming. The Lee family found empty chairs and prepared to enjoy their first day of swimming. But as they settled in, Dongwoo noticed something troubling. Every few minutes, maintenance workers appeared to clean or adjust something. They moved quickly and quietly, always apologizing for any disruption. "Excuse me," one worker said as he tested the water chemistry near where they sat. "So sorry for the interruption. Just making sure everything meets minimum standards." Minimum standards. The phrase stuck with Dongwoo. He began paying more attention to the differences between their area and the glimpses he caught of other pool areas. Later that afternoon, they decided to explore the resort's shopping district. Here, the hierarchy became even more obvious. Stores were clearly divided into different sections based on customer accommodation levels. Budget shops offered basic necessities and simple souvenirs. Standard shops had better quality items and more variety. Premium shops displayed elegant goods behind secure barriers. Luxury boutiques were completely separated, with their own entrances and security systems. "I want to buy a souvenir for Grandma," Nari said, looking at a display of water-themed jewelry in a premium shop window. They entered the shop, and immediately the sales clerk's demeanor changed. The alien, covered in silver scales that reflected light beautifully, looked at their simple clothing and basic identification badges. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked in a tone that suggested they probably couldn't afford anything in the store. "We'd like to look at some jewelry," Sun Hee said politely. "Our premium collection requires premium accommodation status or equivalent." "Credit verification," the clerk replied. "However, we do have a small selection of budget-appropriate items over there." She pointed to a small corner display with simple, obviously cheaper pieces. Nari's face fell with disappointment. Wu Jin looked angry, but his parents remained calm. "Thank you," Dongwoo said. "We'll look around." As they browsed the limited selection, Sun Hee asked casual questions about the store's operation. "How long has this shop been here?" "Oh, about 15 years, the clerk replied, warming up slightly. "Ever since the resort expanded into this section, who decides what areas different guests can access?" "The resort management, of course. But they follow guidelines set by the planetary administration. It's all about maintaining the proper atmosphere for different clientele levels." "And who runs the planetary administration?" The clerk shrugged. "Some corporate entity, very hands-off management style. As long as the lease payments come in on time, they don't interfere with day-to-day operations." That evening, the family attended a resort-wide presentation about available activities. The large auditorium was divided into sections based on accommodation levels. Budget guests sat in the back, with basic seating. Premium guests enjoyed comfortable chairs in the middle. Luxury guests reclined in private boxes with personal service. The presentation showcased the amazing attractions available on Aquatica Prime. Underwater cities with transparent tunnels, floating concert halls where musicians from across the galaxy performed. Racing competitions involving high-speed water vehicles, deep-sea exploration trips to see unique alien marine life. But each activity came with access restrictions. Budget guests could enjoy basic versions of most attractions. Standard guests had more options and better experiences. Premium and luxury guests could access exclusive versions of everything, often in private or semi-private settings. The Coral Garden Expedition, the presenter announced, offers different experience levels. Budget participants enjoy a 2-hour surface viewing tour. Standard guests can take a half-day shallow water exploration. Premium guests experience a full day of deep water adventure with professional guides. Luxury guests enjoy a private 3-day expedition with custom itinerary and personal research team. After the presentation, families discussed their options. Dongwoo calculated their budget carefully. They could afford several basic activities or 1 or 2 standard experiences, but nothing at the premium level. It's okay, Dad, Wu Jin said, noticing his father's concern. We're happy just being here together. The budget activities still. Sound fun, Nari added. And we can swim in our pool every day. Sun-hee smiled at her children's positive attitudes, but Dong-woo noticed she was taking notes on her tablet. She had been asking questions all day about the resort's operations, the planet's management, and the various corporate structures involved. What are you working on? He asked her quietly. Just curious about how this place operates, she replied. It's fascinating how they've organized everything around water access and accommodation levels. Very efficient system. That night, as they prepared for bed in their small room, the family reflected on their first full day. They had enjoyed themselves despite the obvious class divisions. The ocean world was beautiful, the alien diversity was amazing, and they were together as a family. But Dong-woo couldn't shake a growing sense of unease about the rigid hierarchies they had encountered. Every interaction seemed designed to remind them of their place in the galactic social order. Every facility and service came with restrictions based on their perceived status and wealth. Tomorrow we try the Coral Garden. Tour, he announced. The budget version will be perfect for us. Can't wait, Nari said sleepily. As the family settled in for the night, none of them realized that their quiet questions and observations had already begun to attract attention from resort staff. And none of them could have imagined that their next day would bring them face to face with the kind of alien arrogance that would change everything. The third day began peacefully for the Lee family. They had planned to take the Coral Garden tour after breakfast, but their morning was interrupted by an unusual commotion at Community Pool Area C. A crowd of aliens had gathered around the pool, talking excitedly in various languages. Resort staff hurried back and forth with equipment and cleaning supplies. The pool itself was empty of swimmers, though the water looked normal. What's happening? Dong-woo asked a nearby guest, a friendly creature with soft purple fur and large eyes. Someone important is coming to use the pool area, the alien replied. They're upgrading the facilities temporarily. Premium guest privileges, you know. Sun-hee frowned. But this is the community pool for budget guests. Not today, a resort, worker said as he passed by carrying expensive-looking pool furniture. Special arrangement. All community pool activities are suspended until further notice. The Lee family exchanged confused looks. This didn't match anything they had been told about pool access policies. But before they could ask more questions, a new group arrived that immediately commanded everyone's attention. At the center of the group walked a tall, striking alien, unlike any they had seen before. He stood nearly 7 feet high, with smooth, blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water itself. His body was lean but muscular, and his movements carried an unmistakable air of arrogance. Most remarkable were his hands, which ended in long fingers that occasionally sparked with small electrical discharges. Behind him followed an entourage of various aliens, all clearly wealthy and all treating the blue-skinned being with obvious deference. They wore expensive clothing and jewelry that marked them as premium guests. Their conversation was loud and filled with laughter at comments made by their leader. "That's a Zephyrian," whispered the purple-furred alien. "I've never seen one in person before. They're incredibly wealthy and powerful." The Zephyrian surveyed the pool area with obvious disdain. His electric blue eyes swept over the basic facilities and the gathered budget guests. When his gaze fell on the Lee family, his expression shifted to one of mild interest. "How quaint," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. His voice carried easily across the area, rich and commanding. "Humans, I haven't encountered your species in some time." He approached them directly, his followers trailing behind like a royal court. The resort staff quickly moved other guests aside to create a clear path. "I am Veltar of the House of Flowing Waters," he announced with a dramatic gesture. "I trust you are enjoying your stay on this beautiful water world." "Yes, thank you," Dong-woo replied politely. "It's a wonderful planet." Indeed it is, Veltar agreed, though I confess surprise at finding humans here. Your species has such limited experience with aquatic environments. Are you certain you're comfortable around so much water? There was something in his tone that made Wu Jin bristle, but his father's hand on his shoulder kept him quiet. We're quite comfortable, thank you, Sun He said calmly. Veltar smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. How delightful. Perhaps you wouldn't mind if I demonstrated some of the finer aspects of water manipulation. My species has a natural affinity for aquatic arts. Without waiting for an answer, he extended his hands toward the pool. The electrical discharges from his fingers intensified, and the water began to respond. Small waves formed and moved in patterns that defied natural physics. Spirals of water rose from the surface, creating beautiful but impossible shapes. The gathered crowd gasped in appreciation. His followers applauded enthusiastically. Even the Lee family had to admit the display was impressive. Beautiful, Nari said honestly. Thank you, young human, Veltar replied. But this is merely the beginning. Watch this. The water formations became more elaborate. He created a miniature waterspout that danced across the pool's surface. Then he formed shapes that looked like various alien creatures, all made entirely of moving water. His control was precise and artistic. But then something changed. The water creature he had formed suddenly splashed apart, sending a wave of water directly at the Lee family. They were soaked from head to toe while everyone else remained completely dry. Veltar looked shocked. Oh my, how clumsy of me. I do apologize. Sometimes the water has a mind of its own. His followers laughed appreciatively at what was clearly a deliberate act. The resort staff hurried over with towels, but the damage was done. The family's clothes were dripping wet. These things happen, Dongwu said quietly, accepting a towel. Indeed they do, Veltar agreed with false sympathy. Perhaps your family would be more comfortable observing from a greater distance. Waterwork can be unpredictable around those unfamiliar with aquatic arts. The suggestion was clearly an order. The Lee family moved to the back of the crowd, still dripping, but Veltar wasn't finished. As he continued his demonstration, more accidents happened. Water seemed to splash in their direction with suspicious regularity. Each time, Veltar offered elaborate apologies, while his followers found the incidents increasingly amusing. Dad, Wu Jin whispered angrily, he's doing this on purpose. I know, Dongwu replied quietly, but we will not give him the reaction he wants. Sun He said nothing, but she was recording everything on her tablet, being careful to keep it hidden from view. The demonstration lasted for over an hour. By the end, the Lee family was thoroughly soaked while everyone else remained dry. Veltar had managed to make each incident look accidental while clearly targeting them specifically. What a wonderful morning, Veltar announced finally. I do hope everyone enjoyed the display. And again, my sincere apologies to our human friends for the unfortunate splashing. Perhaps tomorrow you might consider observing from an even safer distance. The crowd began to disperse, but Veltar's followers lingered. They made comments just loud enough for the Lee family to hear. Humans really aren't suited for water worlds, are they? Such a primitive species, no natural aquatic abilities at all. Perhaps they should stick to dry planets. The insults were delivered with smiles, making them even more offensive. But the Lee family endured them with dignity, gathering their soggy belongings and preparing to leave. One moment, Veltar called out. I've just had a wonderful idea. Tomorrow evening, the resort is hosting its monthly gala dinner. I would be honored to provide entertainment for the entire gathering. A grand aquatic display that will showcase the true artistry of water manipulation. He looked directly at the Lee family. I do hope you'll attend. I have a feeling it will be a performance you'll never forget. There was something threatening in his invitation that made everyone uncomfortable. But before anyone could respond, he swept away with his entourage, leaving the Lee family standing in puddles of water. What was that about? Nari asked, wringing water from her hair. A bully showing off, Sun-hee said simply. Some beings think money and power give them the right to humiliate others. Can't we report him? Woo-jin asked. Report what? Dong-woo replied sadly. That there were accidents during a water demonstration. He was very careful to make everything look unintentional. As they walked back toward their hotel to change clothes, resort staff began dismantling the expensive equipment that had been brought for Veltar's use. The community pool area was quickly returned to its basic state. Other budget guests approached them with sympathy and support. The purple-furred alien offered them extra towels. A family of rock-like beings shared their disappointment about the canceled pool access. Don't let him get to you, advised an elderly creature with tentacles for arms. Zephyrians are notorious bullies. They think their water abilities make them superior to everyone else. Have you encountered them before? Sun-hee asked. Oh, yes. They have a cultural practice called water shaming. It's considered an art form in their society. They humiliate other species to demonstrate their own superiority. Very unpleasant beings. That evening, as the family dried their belongings and planned their next day's activities, they couldn't shake the feeling that Veltar wasn't finished with them. His invitation to the gala dinner had sounded more like a threat than a social courtesy. Should we skip the dinner tomorrow? Dong-woo wondered aloud. No, Sun-hee said firmly. We won't let a bully drive us into hiding. Besides, I'm curious to see exactly what he has planned. Mom, Woo-jin said, I don't think this is going to end with just getting wet. Sun-hee looked at her family with determination. Then we'll face whatever comes next together. And who knows? Maybe it's time someone taught that arrogant alien that humans are more resilient than he thinks. None of them could have imagined just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The harassment began early the next morning. The Lee family discovered that their room's water system had malfunctioned during the night, flooding their bathroom and soaking their spare clothes. The hotel maintenance staff apologized profusely, claiming it was a rare plumbing failure. Very unusual, the repair worker said, scratching his scaled head. The water pressure regulator just failed completely. Never seen anything like it. But Dong-woo noticed small scorch marks around the plumbing fixtures that looked suspiciously like electrical damage. He said nothing, but his suspicions were growing. At breakfast, their table was mysteriously splashed when a server carrying water glasses stumbled nearby. The young alien server seemed genuinely confused about why he had lost his balance so suddenly. Other diners helped clean up the mess while apologizing for the accident. This is getting ridiculous, Woo-jin muttered, using napkins to dry his shirt. Accidents happen, Sun-hee said calmly, but her eyes were alert and watchful. During their morning walk around the resort, they encountered Veltar near the main shopping area. He was surrounded by his usual group of followers, examining expensive items in a luxury boutique. When he spotted the Lee family, his face lit up with false concern. "Oh, my dear human friends," he called out loudly. "I heard about your plumbing troubles this morning. How terribly unfortunate. And now I see you've had another mishap at breakfast. Such bad luck seems to follow your family." "We're managing fine, thank you," Dong-woo replied politely. "Of course you are. Humans are known for their resilience, if nothing else." Veltar's followers chuckled at the backhanded compliment. "I do hope your luck improves before this evening's gala. It would be such a shame if anything disrupted my performance." The threat was barely disguised. As they walked away, Nari looked troubled. "Dad, why is he being so mean to us?" "Some people need to make others feel small to make themselves feel big," Dong-woo explained. "It says more about him than it does about us." The harassment continued throughout the day. At the resort's gift shop, a display of water-filled souvenirs mysteriously tipped over as they walked past, soaking their feet. The shop owner was baffled by how such a stable display could have fallen on its own. During their planned coral viewing tour, the water taxi they were riding suddenly developed. A leak that seemed to target only their seating area. The driver was confused and apologetic, unable to explain why water was spraying from perfectly intact hull plating. "This is impossible," the driver said, examining the hull. "There's no hole, no crack, no damage, but water is definitely coming through somehow." By afternoon, other resort guests had begun to notice the pattern. The purple-furred alien from the pool area approached them with obvious concern. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I couldn't help but notice you've been having an unusual number of water-related accidents. This isn't normal, even for budget accommodations." "We've noticed too," Sun-hee admitted. "I think someone might be targeting you specifically. Have you offended anyone important?" Before they could answer, Veltar appeared again, seemingly from nowhere. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the gathering crowd. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are our human friends having difficulties with the aquatic environment? How concerning." He gestured toward a nearby decorative fountain, and the water suddenly surged upward in an impressive display. But as it fell back down, a significant amount splashed directly onto the Lee family, while leaving everyone else completely dry. "Oh dear," Veltar said with exaggerated surprise. "The water seems particularly active today. Perhaps the planet's aquatic spirits are trying to send a message?" His followers laughed appreciatively while other guests looked uncomfortable. The purple-furred alien stepped forward angrily. "That was deliberate," she accused. "I beg your pardon," Veltar replied with wounded dignity. "Are you suggesting I would intentionally manipulate water to inconvenience these lovely people? How absurd. I was simply admiring the fountain's natural beauty." "Natural beauty that somehow only splashes humans," the alien shot back. Veltar's expression hardened slightly. "Perhaps you should be more careful about making accusations you cannot prove. Slander can have serious consequences on a world like this." The threat was clear. The purple-furred alien backed down reluctantly, but her eyes blazed with anger. As the afternoon wore on, the family attempted to enjoy their vacation despite the constant harassment. They visited the resort's cultural center, where displays showed the history and diversity of galactic civilization. But even there, Veltar found ways to torment them. An exhibit featuring an aquatic ecosystem suddenly sprayed water when they approached. A drink dispenser malfunctioned, soaking Wu Jin's shoes. Each incident was small and could be explained as mechanical failure or coincidence, but the pattern was unmistakable. "Dad, I want to fight back," Wu Jin said during a brief moment when they were alone. "Violence won't solve this," Dongwu replied firmly. "It would only give him an excuse to escalate further." "Then what do we do?" Sun-hee looked up from her tablet, where she had been taking detailed notes all day. "We document everything, every incident, every witness, every detail, and we wait." "Wait for what?" "For him to make a mistake," she said quietly. "Bullies always do. Eventually." That evening, they prepared for the gala dinner with mixed feelings. Their clothes were still damp from the day's incidents, but they had managed to find one dry outfit each. The hotel staff had been helpful, but clearly puzzled by their repeated water problems. The gala was being held in the resort's largest ballroom, a spectacular space with transparent walls offering views of the ocean in all directions. Tables were arranged in a clear hierarchy, with luxury guests near the front and budget guests relegated to the back. The Lee family found their assigned table in the furthest corner, next to other budget families who greeted them with sympathy and support. Word of their harassment had spread throughout the resort community. "We heard what's been happening," said a family of crystalline beings whose bodies refracted light beautifully. "It's disgraceful behavior." "Has anyone reported it to resort management?" asked a couple of floating jellyfish-like creatures. "We tried," admitted another guest. "But Veltar is spending enormous amounts of money here. The management doesn't want to offend such a valuable customer over what they call minor coincidences. As dinner was served, Veltar held court at the front of the room, regaling his table with loud stories of his various exploits across the galaxy. His voice carried clearly across the ballroom, ensuring everyone could hear his boasts about his wealth, his power, and his superiority over lesser species. "Tonight," he announced during the main course, "I will demonstrate why the Zephyrian people are considered the galaxy's masters of aquatic arts. Prepare yourselves for a display that will be remembered long after you leave this world." The entire ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Some guests seemed excited, while others appeared worried about what he might do. As dessert was being served, Veltar stood and moved to the center of the ballroom. Resort staff quickly cleared a large space around him and activated special lighting. Systems that would enhance his water manipulation abilities. "Ladies and gentlemen of all species," he began dramatically, "tonight I present a performance titled The Natural Order of Things. It will demonstrate the beautiful hierarchy that governs our galaxy, from the most elevated beings down to the most primitive." His eyes found the Lee family in their distant corner, and he smiled coldly. "Let us begin with the highest forms of life," he continued, raising his hands. "Those who have mastered the very elements themselves." Water began rising from hidden reservoirs throughout the ballroom, forming complex patterns in the air above the gathered guests. The display was undeniably magnificent, with spirals and cascades of water moving in perfect harmony. But as the performance continued, it became clear that Veltar was building towards something specific. The water formations began to take on shapes that resembled various alien species, starting with the most prestigious and working downward through the galactic hierarchy. And finally, he announced as his creation reached its climax, "We come to the newest members of our galactic community, species so primitive they can barely cope with simple H2O. A massive formation of water had gathered above the Lee family's table, held in place by Veltar's electrical manipulation. The entire ballroom fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. "Behold," Veltar declared with theatrical triumph, "the humans." The water came crashing down. The massive wave of water crashed down on the Lee family's table with tremendous force. Dongwu threw his arms around his children while Sun-Hee shielded them from the worst of the impact. Water soaked everything within 10 feet of their table, ruining their clothes, their meal, and their dignity in front of hundreds of witnesses. The ballroom erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. Some guests applauded Veltar's dramatic finale, while others looked uncomfortable with the obvious cruelty of the display. Resort staff hurried forward with towels and apologies, but the damage was done. Veltar spread his arms wide and took a theatrical bow. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the natural order of our galaxy. Water flows downward as do all things to find their proper level." His followers cheered enthusiastically. Camera devices flashed throughout the ballroom as other guests recorded the spectacle. The humiliation was being broadcast live across the resort's social networks and beyond. "Behold the humans," Veltar continued with obvious satisfaction. "A species so primitive they cannot even stay dry on a water world. Perhaps they should return to whatever mudball they crawled out of and leave the civilized galaxy to more advanced beings." The laughter grew louder. Several alien guests at nearby tables joined in, emboldened by Veltar's display of power and the apparent approval of resort management. The Lee family sat in their puddle of water, dripping and humiliated before hundreds of strangers. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water and the quiet chuckles of entertained guests. Veltar basked in his triumph, clearly expecting the human family to flee in shame. Then Sun-Hee stood up. Water streamed from her ruined dress as she calmly reached into her waterproof bag and pulled out her tablet. Her movements were deliberate and unhurried, creating a strange tension in the suddenly quiet ballroom. That was quite a performance, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent space. Very impressive water manipulation skills. Veltar preened at what he took as acknowledgement of his superiority. Thank you. My species has been perfecting these arts for millennia. I'm sure they have, Sun He agreed. And I'm equally sure you must be very proud of your ability to humiliate a family during their vacation. Some nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, but Veltar's confident smile never wavered. I merely demonstrated the natural hierarchy of galactic civilization, he replied. Some species rise to the top while others sink to the bottom, like water finding its level. Speaking of levels, Sun He said, activating her tablet, I've been doing some research during our stay here. Very interesting information about this planet and how it operates. A few guests leaned forward with curiosity. Veltar looked mildly amused by what he clearly saw as a desperate attempt to regain dignity. According to the Galactic Registry database, Sun He continued in a clear, carrying voice, the planet Kepler 442b, locally known as Aquatica Prime, was purchased 37 years ago by a private consortium based in the Sol system. The ballroom remained quiet, but a few guests began paying closer attention. The purchasing entity was the Lee Terraforming Consortium, established by Lee Chang-ho of Earth. The current legal owner, as registered with the Galactic Commerce Authority, and updated just last month, is one Lee Dong-woo of Earth, Sol System. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Several guests pulled out their own devices to verify the information. Veltar's confident expression began to shift as he processed what he was hearing. The Lee Terraforming Consortium, Sun He continued relentlessly, purchased this planet when it was nothing but an empty ocean world with basic microbial life. Over 4 decades, the consortium invested over 12 trillion galactic credits in terraforming operations, ecosystem development, and infrastructure creation. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. Every resort on this planet, every artificial island, every bridge and transport system, every luxury facility you see around you exists by lease agreement with the planetary owner. The silence in the ballroom was now complete. Resort management, staff had appeared at the edges of the room, frantically checking their own databases. Veltar's followers were backing away from him slowly. Furthermore, Sun He said, turning to address Veltar directly, you have just spent the last 2 days systematically harassing and humiliating the legal owner of this entire planet, along with his wife and children. The tablet in her hands chimed softly as confirmation data appeared on its screen. She turned it around so the gathered crowd could see the official documentation displayed there. Lee Dong-woo, planetary owner, net worth approximately 47 trillion galactic credits. Status: active ownership of 14 terraformed worlds, majority shareholder in 63 major galactic corporations, founding member of the Terraforming Consortium Alliance. Veltar's face had gone from confident blue to a pale, sickly green. His electrical abilities flickered and died as shock overwhelmed his control. That's impossible, he whispered. The documentation is all public record, Sun He replied calmly. Anyone can verify it through the Galactic Registry. The Lee family's modest appearance and accommodation choices were a personal decision, not a financial necessity. Guests throughout the ballroom were now actively checking the information on their own devices. Excited whispers filled the air as the reality of the situation became clear. You see, Sun He continued, my husband wanted our children to understand the value of humility and to see how our businesses treat ordinary guests. This vacation was intended as a learning experience about character and dignity. She gestured toward the water still dripping from their table. And you have provided an excellent lesson about the difference between true class and mere arrogance. The resort's general manager, a distinguished alien with silver tentacles, came rushing into the ballroom with a team of senior staff. Their faces showed pure panic as they approached the Lee family's table. "Mr. Lee," the manager stammered, "we had no idea. Your reservations, your accommodations, we never realized." Dongwu stood slowly, water still dripping from his simple clothes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but commanded immediate attention. "We specifically requested standard budget accommodations under our personal names," he said. "We wanted to experience your facilities the way ordinary families do." He looked around the silent ballroom. "We wanted to see how our tenants treat their guests, how they handle complaints, how they respond to bullying and harassment." The manager's face went through several color changes as he realized the implications. "And what we discovered," Dongwu continued, "is that when wealthy guests abuse ordinary families, your staff does nothing. When clear harassment occurs, it's ignored because the perpetrator spends money freely." Veltar made a choking sound as the full scope of his mistake became clear. He had not only humiliated one of the galaxy's wealthiest individuals, but had done so publicly, in front of hundreds of witnesses, with the entire incident being broadcast across multiple networks. "I didn't know," he gasped. "If I had realized who you were—" "That's exactly the problem," Sun He said sharply. "You believed our apparent status gave you the right to torment us. You thought wealth and power justified cruelty." The ballroom was now in complete chaos as guests recorded the confrontation and shared it across their social networks. The story was already spreading throughout the galaxy at light speed. "Mr. Lee," the resort manager pleaded, "please allow us to make this right. Anything you need, any accommodation." Dongwu raised his hand for silence. When he spoke again, his words would change everything. Dongwu looked around the silent ballroom, his quiet dignity commanding more respect than any of Veltar's theatrical displays had managed. Water still dripped from his simple clothes, but his presence now dominated the room in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or power. 37 years ago," he began, his voice carrying easily across the hushed space, "my father bought an empty ocean world because he believed that anyone, regardless of their species or background, should be able to experience the beauty of the galaxy." He gestured toward the transparent walls, showing the ocean vista beyond. "Every resort lease agreement on this planet includes specific clauses about equal treatment of all guests. Every contract requires operators to maintain standards of dignity and respect for every visitor, regardless of their accommodation level." The resort manager was visibly sweating now, understanding that their business faced immediate termination. "What we discovered during our stay," Dongwu continued, "is that these requirements have been systematically ignored. Guests are segregated by wealth. Staff are instructed to prioritize premium customers over budget families, and when harassment occurs, it's tolerated as long as the perpetrator spends enough money." Veltar attempted to speak, but Dongwu's raised hand silenced him. "Your behavior, Veltar of the House of Flowing Waters, has been recorded and witnessed by hundreds of beings. You have demonstrated exactly the kind of galactic arrogance that my father's vision was designed to eliminate." The Zephyrian's legs gave out, and he collapsed into a nearby chair. His followers had completely abandoned him, moving to the far side of the ballroom to distance themselves from the disaster. "However," Dongwu said, and the word brought a sudden hush to the room, "I am not interested in petty revenge or theatrical justice." He turned to address the entire gathering. "Instead, this incident will serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. Effective immediately, all resort operators on Aquatica Prime will implement new policies ensuring equal treatment of all guests regardless of their accommodation level or apparent wealth." The crowd listened intently as he outlined his plans. Guest segregation by accommodation type will be eliminated. All pools, restaurants, and facilities will be accessible to all visitors, with pricing based solely on usage rather than perceived status. Staff training will emphasize dignity and respect for every guest. The resort manager nodded frantically, already knowing his operation faced complete restructuring. Furthermore, Dongwu continued. We will establish the Galactic Hospitality Foundation, dedicated to promoting interspecies understanding and eliminating discrimination in the tourism industry. Any resort operator who demonstrates exemplary inclusive practices will receive significant incentives and recognition. Sun-hee stepped forward to add her own thoughts. Our children came here to learn about the diversity of galactic civilization. Instead, they learned about prejudice and bullying, but they also learned that true strength comes from dignity in the face of adversity, and that character matters more than status. Woo-jin and Na-ri, still damp but holding their heads high, moved to stand with their parents. The image of the unified family, representing both humility and incredible power, was already becoming an iconic symbol across galactic social networks. As for you, Veltar, Dongwu said, finally addressing the broken Zephyrian directly, you face no legal consequences from me. Your own society will judge your actions. The galaxy has seen how you behave when you believe yourself superior to others. Veltar's humiliation was complete. News feeds across the galaxy were already reporting the story of the arrogant alien who had tormented the owner of an entire planet. His reputation among the galactic elite was destroyed. Worse, his own species would view his failure and public embarrassment as a profound dishonor. I offer you one opportunity, Dongwu said. You may remain on Aquatica Prime for the remainder of your planned stay, but you will experience the planet as a budget guest, with the same accommodations and treatment you believed appropriate for my family. The suggestion sent visible shudders through Veltar's followers. The idea of a wealthy Zephyrian living in basic accommodations was almost unthinkable. If you accept this experience and learn from it, Dongwu continued, perhaps you will gain some understanding of how your actions affect others. If you choose to leave instead, you may do so freely. Veltar could barely speak. I accept, he whispered. I will stay. The ballroom erupted in excited chatter as guests discussed the extraordinary turn of events. Many began approaching the Lee family to offer apologies and support. The purple-furred alien who had defended them earlier beamed with satisfaction. Over the following days, the story dominated galactic news networks. The image of a humble human family maintaining their dignity while being humiliated became a powerful symbol of grace under pressure. Veltar's transformation from arrogant bully to budget guest became an equally powerful symbol of how quickly fortunes could change. The Lee family spent the remainder of their vacation exploring Aquatica Prime with new friends from across the galaxy. No longer segregated by accommodation levels, guests mixed freely and shared experiences across species lines. The planet's atmosphere became noticeably more welcoming and inclusive. Veltar, meanwhile, struggled through his first experience with basic accommodations. Without his entourage and expensive amenities, he was forced to interact with ordinary beings as equals. The experience was humbling and gradually educational. On their final day, the Lee family sat on the balcony of their original budget room, which they had insisted on keeping despite offers of luxury suites. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, dotted with resorts that were already implementing new inclusive policies. Did we learn what you hoped we would? Woo-jin asked his father. You learned something much more valuable than I had planned, Dongwu replied. You learned that true character is revealed not when things go well, but when they go poorly. Na-ri looked thoughtful. Veltar wasn't really powerful at all, was he? He just had money and tricks with water. Real power, Sun-hee said gently, is knowing when not to use it. Your father could have destroyed Veltar's life with a single command. Instead, he chose to create positive change for thousands of families who will visit this planet in the future. As their shuttle prepared for departure, representatives from dozens of resort operators came to personally thank the Lee family for the reforms that would improve their businesses and guest relations. Other planetary owners had already contacted Dongwu about implementing similar inclusive policies on their worlds. Veltar appeared at the departure terminal, looking humbled and genuinely changed by his week as a budget guest. He approached, the Lee family hesitantly. "I owe you an apology that words cannot express," he said quietly. "I have spent this week learning what it means to be treated as inferior, and I am ashamed of my actions." "Apology accepted," Dongwu replied simply. "What matters now is what you do with what you've learned. I intend to return to my homeworld and establish foundations for interspecies education and cultural exchange. Perhaps I can help prevent other Zephyrians from making my mistakes." As their shuttle lifted off from Aquatica Prime, the Lee family looked down at the ocean world that had become a symbol of positive change across the galaxy. What had begun as a simple family vacation had evolved into a movement for equality and dignity in galactic tourism. "Where should we go for our next vacation?" Nari asked with a grin. "Somewhere quiet," Dongwu replied with a laugh. "Definitely somewhere quiet." But even as he said it, he knew that their reputation would follow them wherever they went. The story of the humble human family who owned a planet would inspire countless beings across the galaxy to treat each other with greater dignity and respect. And in the end, that was worth far more than any vacation could have.